In September 2022, a former BBC radio broadcaster has been jailed for 5.5 years for stalking his old colleagues and subjecting them to what was called an avalanche of hatred. He never stalked his victims physically, but this case poses the questions: are we experiencing a new age of stalking, and what should be the consequences for it? This is the case of Alex Belfield. 2 weeks since the last mic check. How's everybody doing? You as unstable as that wallpaper behind me, ready to fall down and collapse on me any second? Well, then get your shit together, get better tape your wounds, alright. Okay, everybody else been growing their body hair because seasonal, right? We transfer to fall. There's nothing more liberating than like growing body hair on different parts of your body and then being like, do I want to shave it? Do I not? You decide that for yourself. You don't let anybody decide that for you. You really have to get this off your chest. Oh God, okay. It's 5 o'clock on the dot, so here the fuck we go. There's 20 pages in front of us. Here the fuck we go. They will not understand what you're on about. Play the video, because you can't nail the intonation. You don't have the skills. Here the fuck we go. Just play. Let's go.
Here we go! Here the fuck we go! Here the fuck we go!
Detective unit, do I have a case for you? Do I have a bloody case for you? So, as you might have noticed, I haven't been posting for about 2 weeks. I went home for a couple of days, I was off, and then I returned. And I don't want to say I was struggling to find a case that was gripping for myself personally, but I was really struggling. And then a friend of mine sends me this article on Alex Belfield about like BBC ex-producer arrested for online stalking. So I look into it. I opened that article and I was like, this doesn't sound like super interesting. Then I opened up some of his tweets and I was like, okay. Found his YouTube channel. This is what got me going. I will tell you the exact point in this story when I knew I must cover this case. And then I opened up court documents, and at that point I was like, okay, I'm hooked. I'm hooked. I need to find every single detail possible about this story, about this man, about why did he stalk these people. And as I mentioned, probably in the title of this video, this is kind of the watershed case here, in terms of online stalking, in terms of the charges actually being brought against this individual. And as I mentioned in the intro, he was jailed earlier this month. So we're diving into the case that probably people abroad aren't really even aware of, in a typical deep dive style that I usually do on this channel. So if you like deep dives, make sure you like and subscribe. But now let me tell you what to expect out of this video. So we're gonna go into the classic, the short of it and then the long of it. And the long of it is going to include the background on Alex Belfield. Then basically we're gonna cover the bigger issue at stake and possible motive as to why Alex even started stalking his ex-co-workers, and then some people that he never even worked with really. Then where it went from there. So like the breakdown of the stalking and the charges, because we have, as I mentioned, some trial documents. So we're gonna go through these for you to even understand why and like what had happened, and then the verdict in court and where the case stands now. Just about 3 more things before we dive into this case. I feel like this is the case that will interest people who are into court procedurals and really like the nitty-gritty, like the details of the charges, the legalities of the case, compared to some people that just like the story. I don't know if that makes sense. I think it's like a particular thing. If you like Court Junkie, the podcast, probably this is the case for you, compared to, I don't know, Crime Junkie. Very niche references, I get it, but those podcasts have about like millions of listens, so probably somebody would understand. Also, as I have covered a case before where the individual ended up being actually found guilty but then exonerated, and then he found my video, he kicked off, wrote a whole blog post about me, got that video banned in the area. I think it was just banned in the UK, so you can still watch it elsewhere. It was a story of a pickup artist you can find on this channel. I somehow have a feeling that Alex Belfield, upon being released from prison, might go onto YouTube and find other people to harass. people who have covered this story while he is in jail. Something tells me that I wish I were wrong. I wish I were wrong, but I spent hours on this case. So prove me wrong, Alex. But just to protect myself here, all of the information in this video is factual. It's from court documents, it's from online articles, actual trustworthy publications online. So just to cover all of the bases, all of the information about this is online, and the person has been found guilty as mentioned in the court of law. The last bit here before diving into this case, this is a British case. So I haven't been brought up here. I moved here when I was about 16 years, so I don't have that kind of insight and cultural input to offer, where I haven't been brought up listening to the radio broadcasts by the figures that we're mentioning today. I haven't really been brought up watching BBC or just even knowing who Alex Belfield is, who Jeremy Vine was, like watching and taking in that content. So anybody with that type of reference, with that type of cultural insight, leave us those kind of general public opinions in the comments section for people from abroad and for people like myself as well. That being said, any offensive comments towards the victims, I will be moderating the comment section, especially in the first couple of days after releasing this video, and I will be deleting those. Now, for the short of it, put yourselves in the shoes of somebody who worked with a person that decides to leave the company, right? They decide to leave, go their own ways, start freelance work, start their YouTube career, and like also start working for tabloids, writing different stories. You don't have any contact with that person. They have left, they might have worked for you, like they might have worked under you, they might have worked in your vicinity, you might have heard their name. Or, in a lot of cases here, you might have never worked with this person in the first place. However, years down the line, there are videos online on their YouTube channel that are engaging about hundreds of thousands of people, where this person, your ex-coworker, or the person again in the industry that you might have never heard of, is calling you different names. Sometimes exposing your address online, sometimes just getting their followers to engage with you and to make your life a living hell. That is what happened in this story, and the person we are speaking of is, and was rather, a famous journalist. The person convicted here worked for the BBC. So for the long of it, to understand how all of this came about, we have to dig deep and go into the history of Alex Belfield first, and then see how his life was connected to other people in this story. So who is Alex Belfield? He was born on January the 14th, 1980. So I'm mentioning his age in particular in this case because we are talking about a grown man who at the time of his offenses was in his 30s and then now his early 40s when convicted, as this case is developing. Alex's hometown is Nottinghamshire in the UK, and he started his journalism career in 1997. According to his own website, he has over 25 years in radio, live entertainment, PR and show business. And he is one of the busiest and most respected artists in British media and entertainment. And then he misspells the word artist in that same exact sentence. So he worked for about 80 radio stations over the years. In 2001, he also started his own production company that he called Alex Belfield Productions. He presented different daily shows, different breakfast shows, and he really amassed quite a big audience. At his peak, he would have about 50,000 people tuning in for a 9 AM breakfast show. Something that I will acknowledge as a person who, against their own will, what do you mean against your own will, you decided to research this, have listened to quite a few of his YouTube videos, is that Alex was really born for this career of a radio broadcaster. He has that typical voice for it. You either have it or you don't. As you can tell, I'm not a natural when it comes to camera. I don't have the voice. Alex Belfield did. And this is what is pitiful to me. It's like such a talented journalist with an actual voice, like with an actual talent, person who is born to be working in this career, where he had its peak, that we're going to talk about right now, he could have just stayed, plateaued, like stayed on the same pathway. But he chose to do something else. He chose to just go for the controversy, to just do things for the sake of the publicity, and that would be eventually his downfall. As I mentioned, he would have worked over different radio stations. Sometimes they would be BBC, but sometimes he worked for breakfast show on Capitol Gold in Birmingham. Then he took over the Late Night Revolution. However, then he would return to BBC in 2010 to present the mid-morning show. One of the last interviews that he would do prior to leaving BBC would be the one with Jimmy Savile in 2011. So he interviewed him for BBC Radio 2, and this interview would be recorded at Savile's home in Leeds. And this interview would be what propelled, well, one of the things that propelled Alex's career because of its timing. So the interview was broadcast on Christmas Day of 2011, and it would be later republished in October of 2012, and this is once Savile was actually exposed as the prolific pedophile that we now know him as. I really actually want to dig into Jimmy Savile's case one day. I don't know why. I know that it will ruin my soul, it will take away so much from me, but you let me know if you want to see me do a deep dive on that. At this moment in time, or rather at this moment in Alex Belfield's life, his career really peaked. And I'm not saying that just because of the Jimmy Savile interview, because that definitely had the right timing. However, it was also said that his breakfast show at BBC Radio Leeds also had the highest rating for the past 7 years, so he was clearly bringing in the people. And something that Alex knows how to do, even based off of just how many subscribers he has on YouTube, he knows how to bring the community together. He knows how to get the people to follow him and to listen to him. So it might come as a surprise that this is when he actually decides to leave BBC. This will be 2011 when he would decide to leave. And he would describe the last 10 months at BBC Leeds as the worst year of his life. Despite of all of the ratings, despite of him amassing the audiences here. So in hindsight now, I will let you know, loop you in on when the offences were taking place. The stalking offences would take place between 2012, so just a year after he left BBC Leeds, and 2021. So before we dive into those offences and into the reasons why he left BBC, let's just touch upon what we know about his BBC career up until that point. So between 1997 and 2011. Rather the controversies surrounding his career. Basically, were there ever signs in the past as to who Alex Belfield might become and how then that would tie in with his offences? And yes, there were controversies when it came to Alex's career. So during his early career days, when he was in Mansfield Radio, he would establish some fake sackings. So I couldn't really understand this, but basically from what I have gotten, the gist is that he would go live on air and then he would pretend to be fired on the air and then like would magically reappear the next day, and this would like piss people off because they think like he actually got fired and then he'd come back online, something along those lines. Those, you know, it's forgivable, like that kind of thing, like you're kind of watching past, you're like, oh, okay, he's just messing, probably placed a dare with somebody who is also working on air with him that day, cool. Like it would piss probably some people off and then they'd get over it and eventually the joke would run its course. However, then in more recent years, well, rather before he would leave BBC, in 2005, when he was hosting a late-night radio show, he referred to a mother of triplets as a slapper. Slapper is just like a slang for sex worker, prostitute, and his comments would be described as ill-judged. So I looked into this, and there's not that many articles, but I found one. I believe this is from Ofcom actually, from 2006, that goes even in more detail on this. So what had happened is somebody just seemed to have called into the show while Alex Belfield was running it, and this person was a 16-year-old girl. As he is having this phone call on air with this 16-year-old girl, he called her dirty little slapper and a dirty little tart. So despite of this phone-in section being suspended, Ofcom still said that he should have taken greater steps to ensure that this hadn't been aired. However, he would just get a slap on the wrist. And then, of course, because he was never really reprimanded for it, no action was really taken, in 2010, while now working for BBC Radio Leeds, he was suspended for 1 day, one single day, after making lewd comments about another presenter. This would be a weather presenter called Keely Donovan. There really aren't any further details when it comes to the lewd comments. Like, every single article I found online states the exact same thing. So I'm not sure whether that's because that's from 2010 or just because nobody really went into detail on it. But lewd just implies they were sexual in nature. So that happens in 2010. And then he will decide to leave BBC Radio Leeds in 2011. And he would give two main reasons. Like, there are different articles on this as to like why he left the BBC Leeds. But I found his own videos, so like the video on his own YouTube channel. And when you think about it, the reasons that he gives, well, it's just a short video and he only mentions one of these arguments, but the arguments that he gives for leaving BBC are very relatable. It's probably the most relatable thing you will hear in this video. If somebody was to ask you why you're leaving your job, you would probably mention these two exact reasons: the management and the pay. And that is exactly why Alex Belfield decided to leave. He said that it would be liberating to be away from dreadfully dull and creatively suffocating bosses, when he referred to the management, the BBC. And then, when he was asked on air why he left, and when I mean on air, he would do kind of like a radio show on his YouTube channel, so he had a number that people called in, and then just like me, he would have a camera and a microphone and everything set up, and when people would call in, he'd just answer their questions. So when somebody asked him a question there, he said, "I asked for a pay rise and they didn't want to pay it, so I resigned." And then he said how he's a bit bored talking about it, to be honest, like immediately sort of went into a dismissive mode, asking, "Do you have any further questions?" So a bit too dismissive, as if this might be a trigger, as if he might just be trying to get rid of this question and move on.
Oh no, you were on mid-morning show, weren't you, for ages?
I was only on for 10 months. I asked for a pay rise, got the biggest figures in 7 years and resigned. Handed my notice in to Rosina Breen because she didn't want to pay me 50 quid more a show. She'd rather have fartheads on like Liz Green, who are a ratings disaster, or Stephanie Hurst, that's got the lowest audience in history. Any more questions about Radio Leeds? I'm a bit bored talking about it, to be honest.
But you see, that pay rise thing is something that stuck out to me because of something that I have read in his court documents. So in the court docs, he says that women, in particular here, so like at BBC, were progressing before him, and this was due to the tick box culture, while he was the person who had the actual talent. And if you hate BBC enough and listen to him long enough, if you follow him, subscribe to his beliefs, if you have actually been listening to him for years, you realize that he is really good at convincing you that he is the victim here. Like, if you don't have the context, if you have no idea of his background, of the controversy surrounding him, of his offenses, you might be subscribing to everything that he is telling you, because he's just that good at telling a story. So based off of the controversies and the information in the articles, he either might have been sacked or he was asked to leave. Because, as you can imagine, now the station's reputation is at stake. So, in my personal opinion, and you tell me what you think after hearing the rest of this story, he was probably told either leave or we are going to fire you. That's again just my opinion based off of what I read. And this is something that people might call a trigger because it led to a whole true crime case. This will tie in with what the court will hear earlier this year in 2022, and they will hear that Alex Belfield was accused of stalking members of the BBC staff after his bosses failed to renew his contract in 2011, so at this very point in time. And they will also hear how he would then proceed between 2012 and 2021 to bombard presenters, different editors and other colleagues with vile emails, tweets and messages. And he would also upload videos to his YouTube channel calling people names. And who were these people? They were people from the industry, some of them his fellow broadcasters. Just slandering them on YouTube channel wouldn't cause enough havoc. There had to be some underlying motivation there for his followers to really get rattled, for him to have them on board. And where Alex will find that underlying motivation, and this is my personal opinion here, again based off of the multiple videos that I have seen on his channel, would be in the organization itself, in the BBC. So for me to loop especially international listeners here on the BBC and the core issue here in the past decade, but especially since Brexit, so about 2016 now, BBC had been under scrutiny. And it had been under scrutiny mostly as to where is the taxpayers' money going. The core of this issue is what here is known as the BBC license, just the TV license. The core of this issue, the whole crusade against the BBC that Alex really subscribes to, and so many people that follow him do as well, surrounds the TV license here in the UK. Under the current way that BBC is funded, the majority of its income comes from the mandatory TV license fee. So this isn't just some petty cash. According to the information I could find online, the BBC's income was about 4.9 billion in 2020, out of which 3.5 billion comes from the license fee. You need a TV license here in the UK if you're either watching or recording any shows that are being shown on live TV. So this isn't just restricted to BBC channels, it's any other channels on TV. However, the rules surrounding license fee are made deliberately unclear, and that's in order to keep people from coughing up. If you have lived here, you probably have gotten spammed by the licensing services at some point, you probably get emails. They try to get you to confirm, to fill out the form online, to confirm that you haven't watched TV. They can make surprise visits. They do really everything possible to get you either to pay for the license fee or for the fine if you have been watching it and you haven't been paying for the fee. And the prosecutions of the non-license fee payment are discriminatory. They disproportionately affect women and the poor due to the deliberate lack of clarity surrounding the payment and when it's needed. Just like with Jimmy Savile's video, here the timing was right for Alex, especially once he left BBC, he went freelance and he started making YouTube videos. So he seemed to have caught the public mood at the right time, especially post-2016. And this is where I'm going to loop you in on something, so that you don't have to go onto Alex's YouTube channel and scroll for like hundreds and hundreds of his videos. He made a video on defunding the BBC for the first time, I would say 8 years ago, and then he just stopped. He would make other content that we're going to talk about in a second. And then it was about 2019 when he started really focusing on defunding the BBC, sue the BBC, putting his PayPal link, putting the GoFundMe pages, really trying to fight on this front. And two of the main points that people who want to defund the BBC make, and Alex made really, is surrounding the taxpayers' money, going into it without actually understanding what the money is going towards. Like, why is it so unclear and what are we actually paying for? Like, if you were to watch TV one day of the year, why would you have to pay for it? But also, and this is going to be the focus of Alex Belfield's videos, is rather what BBC staff is spending your money on. are people working there pocketing it. So I'll play you the breakdown. I don't know where he found these facts. I don't know if they're available online, but he basically tries to give you the facts. So like how many people are using, I don't know, private planes, how many people are actually benefiting from it, people who are working there and how they're pocketing that money, and how, yes, it's funding the BBC, but also who is the money actually going towards, because in his mind and in the mind of other people, there's absolutely no need for people to cough up this amount of money for the license fee. And it doesn't make sense, and there's a lot of speculation where taxpayers' money is actually going towards.
Ridiculous. We're paying for this stuff. 131 train tickets purchased at more than £300. Again, how do they do this? I go £70 first class, only 2 of which were first class. The BBC books hundreds of hotels and taxis that they don't use and pays for them. Meanwhile, over 1,000 staff were given £20,000 worth of awards, vouchers in other words. It's just ridiculous. 2,600 for them to get pissed. Good Lord. The BBC hired 43 staff and spent £2.3 million on health and safety. Good God. £4 million on consultants, despite hundreds of managers. What a car crash. Talking of which, they crashed £370,000 worth of repairs in cars last year. Mystery thefts, this is curious, 204,000. Cash going missing of $8,000. Laptops and computers and foodstuffs and equipment, 50,000 each for 3 cameras.
And there are people online, there's the Fund the BBC, their social media pages, there are whole campaigns online surrounding this particular issue. There are people actually giving you the facts on it. Alex is not the first or the last person who is trying to defund the BBC. And it makes a lot of people wonder, why is Alex kind of like on this crusade doing this independently? Why in all of these videos he's asking you to use his own GoFundMe page at that time, or like his own PayPal? Like, where is that money really going? Like the money that people are, instead of paying the license fee, giving to Alex Belfield. This brings me to the exact moment where I knew I had to cover this story, and that was after seeing the comments on his videos surrounding suing the BBC, defunding the BBC, GoFund pages, his own PayPal account. Because you have to wonder where that money is going, but also so many comments were by his supporters, by people who at this point believe in this guy, like have been following him throughout his career. And now, of course, if he's going to rally them up against this cause, against defunding the BBC that they already want to do, they're going to, instead of paying the TV license fee, give that money to Alex. And this is what I just find vile, because how do you know for sure where your money is going if you're giving it to him through his PayPal? You're not donating it to the cause directly, to the campaign directly, which there are campaigns, as I have mentioned, online. And pin this in your head, because I will have a comment further on this when we come to the trial. From this point on in the story, you'll either see this as Alex's own crusade to end the BBC, motivated purely by his inside information as somebody who worked there, and also his anger at where taxpayers' money is going. Or you can see this as a personal vendetta against the company that might have asked him to leave, and his ego was finally hurt one last time. The judge in court would say, "I find that the motivating factor in your communications about these complainants was not the exercise of journalistic freedom to comment on matters of public interest, but personal grudges and responses to real or apparent slights." With this story and the way that I'm trying to tell it, you have the benefit of the hindsight, you have the background, you have the controversies, you have the crucial moment of Alex leaving the BBC for his freelance career, which is where we are going to pick up now in the timeline. So after hearing the core of this story, it is up to you to make your own decisions as to which one flows better. Is there a motivation here? Is there an underlining story that he had then tried to use into his favor, and a clear grudge against an organization, a clear grudge against the company, and then defunding the BBC sort of just like as a bigger picture, as a bigger circle here, that he also tried to exploit into his favor and to use to rally those people, his followers, up in order to see this through his lens, in order to hate the people that are associated with the organization because they're spending the taxpayers' money on who knows what, and they're not doing anything really about it? Or is the story completely opposite, whether there was no motivation at all, he just decided to move on from the BBC, and maybe people who are claiming that Alex had stalked them have been the ones to actually turn on him and stalk him. Back into our timeline, Alex quits BBC, if you remember. It was the management issues and the pay rise, that he wasn't getting enough money. And this is when he would go freelance. So since 2012, he focused all of his efforts on presenting his content on celebrity radio. So this would be his own website and also his YouTube channel that is called Alex Belfield, The Voice of Reason. Even from this early period of his freelance work, from the early 2010s, you can really see the shift, where he was never like a serious journalist in a way, where he was never writing about like news, politics and stuff, but here is where he went to work for solely tabloids from what I have seen. So he worked and had written for The Sun, The Daily Mirror, Sunday People, Daily Stars, literally every tabloid in the country. And he would also then on his YouTube channel do different commentaries and different interviews. So I scrolled as far as possible, and like sometimes he would review like Super Bowl performances or would review theater plays, musicals, and have interviews with like other, mostly UK celebrities. So this would be kind of the shift that he had there. However, then, as his channel progresses, really where it started peaking was in 2019. And this would be the direct link, the direct correlation when he started talking against the BBC. So this is when he would reach around 100,000 subscribers. And then between 2019 and 2021, as he went on to harass these people online, to really rally up all of his subscribers, to write to BBC, to harass others online, where he was claiming he was under attack, that is where his channel would grow even further to where it is today. So throughout his career in 2010s, he had again a couple of front page stories. So in 2017, he had 3 front page exclusive stories and over 100-page lead stories published in the national press here in the UK. Some of his bigger stories were, for example, in 2015, when he flew to New York in order to break the story of a near-fatal accident at a Criss Angel magic show. Again, the timing was on Alex's side here, so this was one of those stunts during the show where Criss Angel, the main magician here, ended up hanging upside down in a straight jacket. Luckily, they managed to notice that something went wrong during the stunt and he ended up in a hospital and he was alive. However, for Alex, this story was breaking news. He was the one to write about it and report on it, and the story ran on over 200 outlets. It was the most watched morning show on different US networks as well. Again, the timing just worked for this guy over and over again, and he could have milked it. He could have been a respected journalist. He could have chosen a different path. There were so many, like he had so much luck. Like the amount of luck that he had as an actual journalist to have breaking stories so many times and just choose to be like, no, ignore that. Let's go a different fucking pathway. Let's go on a freaking rampage. Let's go on a crusade. Alex the Savior. It just tells you something about the personality. I'm not gonna make conclusions as of yet, but we will make conclusions later. That same year, he also made national headlines because he had another controversial interview with Noel Edmonds for the Daily Mirror. And this would also be printed in different publications and would be debated on different BBC shows. So as he's working for tabloids, he's also building his YouTube channel, and there is a definite switch to controversy only, controversy-based content. As I mentioned, his YouTube channel will experience the biggest growth between 2019 and 2021. And then January 2021 comes around and Alex suddenly is quiet on all fronts, but especially social media. He stopped uploading videos on his YouTube channel as well, and for days people that follow him wondered what the hell happened. And even worse, this article says that I have just shamelessly copy-pasted. On January the 12th, 2021, he tweeted the image of a TV displaying the words "off air," along the caption, "Free speech is dead." Dramatization on point. So what had happened? Well, on January the 13th, he didn't let you wait for long. He posted a message on Twitter telling his followers that he would be back soon. He then started posting messages about corruption, about how everybody would be brought in front of the judge, everybody harassing him would be brought in front of the courts and would be facing legal charges. Then he makes a video thanking people for their support and saying that whatever the issue is now a legal matter. This is, by the way, happening during quarantine here, during lockdown in the UK, and he blatantly starts asking people for money without actually even going into why he's asking you for this money in the videos that he is posting here. He finally then gets to the bit where he tells us there are dark forces that are putting his channel under attack.
If you can help me, I'd like some money. But listen to me, if you can't, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Me suing people is not your priority. You need to feed your kids and all that stuff, right? I don't need to go over this. But if you can afford a pint, buy me a pint. It will go back. Now, what we're going to do at the end, the money that's raised through getting us back on the air, we will win back in a court of law if we're successful, and that will be given to charity. I am told it is impossible because of the numbers of people donating. It cannot be refunded. But a total has been given. So far, it's over £20,000 has gone to a barrister. I think it's 26,000, something like that, that was raised earlier in the year. That has gone to a barrister who has it on account. It's called 14,000, I think, of that has been spent so far. Every penny will be accounted for. Now we get into big school, though. Now we've got a big pile of shit to sort out over this sabotage this week. I will do whatever I can to keep this channel on the air. And I'm telling you, I'm not suicidal. I'm not the kind of guy that plays the mental health card. And I'm perfectly fine. But just remember this video if anything happens to me. Because I'm telling you, there are dark forces out there that are going to stop at nothing to destroy me and this channel. And we've got somewhere in exposing it this week and finding out where the root of this cause is. And now we have to get the top lawyers to take the most fierce action against them as possible.
The story finally comes out, and the public learns that there are 8 people bringing legal actions against him. The article would state that Alex Belfield has been charged with 12 stalking charges and harassing BBC star Jeremy Vine among 7 other colleagues. His trial was stated to begin on July the 4th, 2022. So I will post who he has been accused of stalking on the screen and then what his charges are, and here pay attention to the years. As I have been saying throughout this video, his charges have been taking place between 2012 and 2021. So there are people that he has been stalking and harassing online between 2012 and 2017. We're going to talk about those first. And then there's kind of like a later set of charges here. Let's talk about the connection between these people and Alex in the decades since he went freelance. You have Rosina Breen, who was his direct boss. Then you have Helen Thomas, who was Rosina's boss, so hierarchically like 2 positions above Alex. Then you have Liz Green, who was a fellow radio presenter, and you have Stephanie Hurst, who was the presenter the same time that he worked there, but then it is said that she was the one to take over his slot once he actually left the BBC. So the courts will hear about the offences that were happening actually while he was still working for BBC Radio Leeds. The trial would open defining what the offences that we are talking about here are. So it would define what we mean by stalking in this case. As I have mentioned, this is a Watershed case. It isn't just somebody creeping up on somebody's house. It isn't somebody following somebody in a car. Everything here, well, rather most of it really happened online. It would also state that the stalking in this case was not a conventional type. That he made YouTube videos about his victims, that he posted messages on social media about them and sent emails either to them or about them. the judge would acknowledge that, as Alex described in some of his videos, in his own words, his aim was to haunt his victims. The way that he would haunt them is that he would either send direct emails to them. If they try to block those emails, then he would send them from a different email address. And also, what you're gonna find out, especially with women in this case, is sometimes he would send emails about them with like comments that were just irrational, like just claims, different claims about them to other people working in the BBC. Sometimes he also would obtain their addresses and then would share those with the public. And he also did everything, especially once he started gaining substantial audience, in such a way where he encouraged the viewers to also get negative views and also to either haunt the BBC, write to the press office. You'll hear everything in these videos if they're not copyrighted for whatever reason. Like, he literally gets people to contact the BBC, to spam them, to like harass these people. And he, as I mentioned, has amassed quite a following by this point. The judge would say that the pre-sentence report would show that Belfield fully acknowledges the distress to the victims, and it also highlights that he still appears to focus on the impact on himself, and feels in certain respects that he had been the one who had been unfairly treated. Something to emphasize on here, because I have realized this and like the implication of it way too late down the line, like way too late in researching this story. And that is that Alex Belfield represented himself in the court. The way I realized that is, and this is a spoiler alert yet again, but Alex would go to court, right? So between July and September of this year, he would go to court, and then after every single day in court, he would either be in front of the courtroom, or in more cases, he would actually go home with like the transcript of what had been said in the court of law, and then he would read it out to people on his YouTube channel. He was commenting on his own trial after being accused of trolling people online, of calling people names in the YouTube videos, then having the chance to again re-victimize those people in court because he didn't have a lawyer, he was representing himself, and then on top of that, re-victimize them, however many re's there are in there, on his YouTube channel again, as he was reading out the questioning, the line of questioning between him and his own victims in court. I don't know, that just blows my mind. And here is where I bring you to something that I brought up in the past, like as I was starting this video talking to you about the background. Because here in the UK, from everything that I have read, again, if you can't afford a lawyer, which maybe was the case here, because I was thinking, why? Why did he not choose to have a lawyer in court? Like, what is a logical option here? What is the logical reasoning? Like, you want to do everything to defend yourself. So you can get legal counsel here for free, you just have to prove that you can't pay for it. But everything you hear him say during these videos is around how he can't pay, right? Like, if all of the money that he has raised for people paying for defunding the BBC, paying into his PayPal account, if that money is actually going towards those causes, that's also understandable. Like, if he isn't lying to his followers, to his supporters, and the money is actually going to the causes, okay, cool. Maybe he doesn't have the money to pay for the lawyer. And in that case, I'm posing a question here, because if he doesn't have the money to pay for the lawyer, he can ask to have one for free, and he will be granted legal counsel for free. So why doesn't he do it? Why does he still choose to represent himself in court? Is it that maybe the image of a narcissist that we have been forming in our heads might be correct? Just like the Bundys of this world, Alex Belfield will go into the courtroom every day and he would question the victims that he had harassed throughout the past decade. The first set of people we're going to be speaking about are the women in this case, and there is a reason for that divide. And the reason, spoiler alert, will be decided upon the verdicts here. So you're about to rage. Let's just set the scene. You're about to feel insane amount of rage. But let us start off with the women. So Rosina, who was his direct boss, who was the person that gave him the job at BBC Radio Leeds, would tell the jurors that she had been harassed by him ever since his contract was not renewed in 2011. The jurors will hear that Alex was the person making internal complaints at the BBC Trust about the conduct of Rosina Breen and then Helen Thomas, that the BBC investigated those claims, but that they came to nothing. When it came to the women that he directly worked with or knew from that contest, so his direct boss, Rosina, Helen Thomas, who was her boss, and then Liz Green, who was his co-worker, they suffered a campaign of harassment by email and social media between 2012 and 2017. This went on for a decade, where he would either email senior staff at the BBC, he would bulk email people about these three women, he would put sexualized comments in those emails, he would just blindly copy anybody. And if you remember the earlier controversies on this guy, like puzzle pieces really start to fall together here. As these women would never reply or engage, sometimes they would delete some of the emails, sometimes they just wouldn't respond, or they'd have to face backlash from their colleagues, the possible motivations kind of arise in court, and the judge would say that he believes that Alex targeted them because of the personal grudges against them. They were his former managers and he felt mistreated during his time at the BBC Radio Leeds. And this is also, when you think about it, like a really short period of time, like 10 months between 2010 and 2011, that he had just been triggered by, set off the rails for this short period of time, like in the span of his whole career. Like some things must have gone down, and it could be due to the previous controversies that we have spoken about, but this man has just been fixated on ruining people's lives, like right after this, right after he left the BBC. And this is where we find out that he also felt like the women were being promoted due to the tick box culture, and him, with all of his talents, just simply couldn't get a pay rise. I mean, according to Alex Belfield, women broke the glass ceiling back in the day. Back 2010, women, finally, they broke the glass ceiling. It's all good, guys. We are getting paid much more than men. According to Alex Belfield, we are doing so well, regardless of our skills. We are perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. When it comes, however, to Stephanie Hurst, and this is the one that is blood-curdling. Stephanie is famous for being one of the first trans public broadcasters, radio broadcasters, to be hired by the BBC, by like really big stations here in the country. And Alex, if you remember from that screenshot, actually started harassing her from 2017 onwards. And this is believed by the courts to be because she declined to have an interview with him. Remember, he did his YouTube, and sometimes, yeah, it would be reviewing Shakira's Super Bowl performance, but sometimes it would be interviews with different celebrities. So he declines, well, rather Stephanie declines to have an interview with him. Supposed to be, and this interview was supposed to be around her gender transition. And this set him off. So he now starts harassing Stephanie, and all done in that jokey way where it's like, it's just comedic content, it's just parody. So the judge said in the statement for the court that he doesn't accept this as being just comedic content. There's nothing funny about it. The extent that this went to was that there were transphobic, hateful comments that he had made about Stephanie Hurst. There were some emojis that he had been sending to her that were offensive in nature. We don't really know much more when it comes to this communication, but again, this lasted between 2017 and 2021, according to the court records. So when you hear that, with emails being provided to the court, these women proving that this had been happening for the past X amount of years, transphobia included, clear motivations for so many people, because here there's personal impact, personal grudges, you'd think he would be found guilty. But because I spoiled this before, the verdicts in relation to each complainant here were not guilty on these 4 counts. For Rosina Breen, Liz Green, Helen Thomas, and Stephanie Hurst. The judge accepted the explanations about how their mental health had been affected. They have been granted restraining orders, and I believe the extent of those, based off of the court docs, means also electronic communications. Like if he was to send them an email once he's out of prison, like that's the breach of the restraining order and he can go back to jail. So he's forbidden from contacting them in any way, which again is why this case is so controversial and so popular here, because it's for the first time that like stalking is kind of translated to also online trolling. And this means if somebody was to contact, or rather if your offender was to contact you online, that they can also be in shape, because the restraining order isn't just limited to somebody physically stalking you. These 4 women are now given indefinite restraining orders against Alex, but the question remains, what then warranted the verdict of guilty? And I will keep my thoughts until the end here, but let's see if you can spot the same patterns or if you share the same opinion with me by the end of this video. The next person on that list would be Ben Hewis. And Ben Hewis is a videographer, and he is kind of like in the theater world. Rather, he had worked with different clients for the National Theatre here in the UK, and also the only connection here really between Alex and Ben would be that Alex also interviewed people in that world, would do reviews for theatre performances. So Ben didn't work for the BBC, but was allegedly contacted by the people that did. And those people claimed, or rather have sent Ben an email, some sort of correspondence, saying that Belfield harassed them for years. And then Ben Hewis tweeted about this. So the breakdown, according to Alex, was that this tweet happened on October the 1st, 2019, and we have that tweet, we have the dates here correctly, and that unprovoked, Ben Hewis went after Alex's career and reputation. And in this tweet, Ben said that he had, based off of this email, blocked and deleted Alex Belfield, and he suggested that all of his other theatre friends do the same. In short, and as Alex will tell you during the video here that I have found, because it had been copied, it had been since removed from the YouTube channel, as a lot of these videos where he's actually speaking about these people and then where the charges have been brought based off of them have been deleted. So literally like a lot of them would have been removed, but then again a lot of people that support Alex Belfield had just copied them online, so you can still find them. So there's a video of Alex talking about how it all started with that email that Ben Hewis had shared. How BBC is bullying him and how the lawyers are on his case only, how BBC wants him silenced, dead and gone. So during this video that I have actually watched in full on Celebrity Radio, basically he speaks about how there's this tweet, right? Ben tweeted on October the 1st, whatever, 2019, there's a screenshot of that email, he goes on to apologize, but fucking Alex had noticed it, he's now telling his theater colleagues to block him, this is clear attack on his personality. And he, again, like if you're a supporter of Alex Belfield, you feel for him, because he asks you, how would you feel if somebody just unprovoked went after you without the information confirmed, but his main goal is to call Ben Hewis, to start legal action, to contact him, to find who that email originates from. And he has the idea, not the idea, he's convinced, Alex Belfield is convinced that he knows exactly who that email is from, and that that person works for the BBC.
6 months ago, my life was destroyed by a man called Ben Hewis, who decided to publish an anonymous email by some low-life scumbag that intended to destroy me with lies. Ben Hewis wrote on the 1st of October 2019, "Just received this very revealing email about Alex Belfield detailing years of abuse and harassment of BBC colleagues. Needless to say, I've deleted my tweets and blocked him. I suggest my pals in theatre do the same." Unfortunately for Ben Hewis, he's legally fucked because he encouraged the whole industry to turn their back on me based on lies. One of these people was Baz Bambergoin, the #1 reviewer in Britain, the most credible showbiz journalist in the country, who blocked me and called me abhorrent on the back of that tweet. In terms of law, that leaves Ben Hewis screwed. He would almost certainly lose his house like Katie Hopkins over this appalling lie. The email was written by somebody we're going to get to in a moment who I believe works at the BBC, and the reason I believe he works at the BBC is because he exposed himself within the email. I don't think he thought that Ben Hewis was going to publish it, but he's so stupid he did. The email read, "For 15 years now, this person has been harassing me at work, posting YouTube videos mocking me, selling stories to the tabloid newspapers. The list is endless." He goes on to accuse me of being transphobic, to have been harassing people, having the police involved and BBC security. He says that I sent 2,000 emails to one presenter in a year, which is, by the way, 5 emails a day. He calls me mad, a sociopath, says I sell trashy stories, and the list goes on. Now, unfortunately for the person who wrote that, they're going to have their day in court. Now, let's talk about Ben Hewis to begin. This guy is really the lowest of the low. At a time when we talk about be kind, what Ben Hewis was doing was trying to find any excuse to throw me under the bus without fact-checking any of the details of the information within the email that he chose to publish under his own account. He's so stupid he thought he retweeted it. He didn't. He published it, which leaves him legally liable. The trouble with Ben Hewis is he's obviously thick. He's stupid. He's a moron. You can hear in the tape afterwards he doesn't understand any of the consequences of his actions. I'm going to play you a tape by Ben Hewis. I phoned him the day after and tried to explain to him the seriousness of his actions. This guy is scum-sucking pond life, and the reason being he refuses to release the author's name of that email. He refuses to send me a copy of it, and unfortunately for him, the police are now involved. It's now become a criminal inquiry, and Nottingham Police PC Ryan Rowe is investigating this, and it could end up with somebody going to jail. It could end up with a full criminal inquiry.
So during that video, and then during the call with Ben, and as he's enraged, you can really hear it in Alex's voice. He also says that he exchanged hundreds of emails with the BBC, and he just doesn't hear the issue there. Then, later in that recording, he says that it was 15 emails. In the court, Rosina Breen would say that he sent about 6,000 emails to the BBC. Alex would say that's ludicrous, like that would be an insane amount of emails just even on the daily. And Alex would say there were only 29 emails that were produced as evidence by the prosecution. So if that isn't clear, there's a tweet, right? Alex is desperate to defend his honor and to find out who is falsely accusing him of harassment, of online trolling, of bullying. He believes it's one person, but he needs it proven. He needs to know who that email to Ben Hewis came from. And he is, from this point on a rampage, on a crusade. He is advising his followers to email BBC, to email different people, like directly, and also the press office. He is just desperately trying to prove, with Freedom of Information Act, with every means, by any means necessary, who this person is. And he believes it's a man called Bernie Keefe. Well, the real name of Bernie Keefe is Bernard Spedding.
Then if I wrote to the press office, wouldn't the press office say, "Stop harassing our member of staff, we've told you he didn't write it, now go away"? And then if you hired a lawyer at RPC who are on £300, £400 an hour, wouldn't they just write back and say, "Listen, we've told you 3 times, he has not written the email, so go away"? Well, they've refused to do this in over 100 email correspondence between me, the BBC and RPC. They know why they're doing this, because if somebody confesses to a crime, a lawyer then cannot say they didn't do it. That's just one of the unspoken rules of the law. So it is my belief, after 6 months, after begging and pleading with the BBC, BBC Press Office, BBC Legal Department, and by the way, there are 60 lawyers in the BBC Legal Department, and they've still hired an independent lawyer, which I'm guessing we're having to pay for. It's an absolute scandal. Now, if you're sat here thinking you deserve this, how would you like it if somebody wrote lies about you, and then you asked them, did the person do it, and they refused to say they didn't? This is very telling. Now, I want to give you an insight into Bernie Keefe. This man is a bully within the building. He's bullied staff around him for many, many years. He doesn't go into the office upstairs. This is a clip from his radio show a few years ago. He said I sold stories about him to the newspapers. Well, I'm a journalist for the Daily Mail, Daily Mirror, Sunday People, Sun, and Sun on Sunday. I have published work almost weekly in all of these publications. And when you threaten to punch a boss at work, that's going to get in the papers. That's what Bernie doesn't understand. He thinks he's broadcasting just to his few fans on BBC Northampton. He forgets that he represents the BBC. This is Bernie Keith threatening to punch a manager, which is the story I got in the paper. I think you'll agree it's an extraordinary clip that no one else would get away with, that the newspaper and their lawyers at News UK agreed was a perfectly legitimate story to run. The BBC did not have this pulled. I was not asked to retract it. So therefore, we conclude that this was a legitimate story. So in terms of selling stories, there's only one person I've ever done it to at the BBC over 15 years, and that's Bernie Keith. So in this one thing, he's identified himself.
Top guys in local radio are coming into this place. One of them, I've known people slip into a coma during one of his motivational speeches. So keep him away from me, because I'm liable to punch him. This fella is now advisor to every breakfast show in local radio. You couldn't make it up. I can't do the job. I know, here's promotion. No, seriously, I really can't do the job. Yes, well, keep your head down. The DG's job's available in 2 years. You're in the frame. But I'm rubbish. Well, you'll be director of the trust then. Maybe a joist will fall on him.
There's Bernie threatening violence against a manager at BBC Northampton. When all this kicked off with the lawyers a month ago, Bernie went on air and admitted that he's mentally ill and having counselling. Now you should say, well, you should be kind and you shouldn't be carrying on with this if Bernie's mentally ill. I don't believe Bernie's mentally ill. I believe Bernie is playing the victim. You cannot do something like this and hide behind mental illness. I think it's shocking that he's attempted to do that.
The connection between Bernie and Alex is that they knew each other through work. Bernie would actually be the person to suggest Alex for a job at a friend's radio station in South Wales. So this would be very early in Alex's career. So he got the job on the breakfast show, but Bernie didn't know how long he remained there. So it was just like that they were both kind of like BBC radio presenters at different times, and that's how they knew each other very loosely at that moment in time. Bernie, from this point on, like after recommending him for a job, doesn't really hear about Alex. That is until he hears from his own boss that Alex actually got in touch with him. And this would be when Bernie worked for Radio Northampton, so BBC Radio Northampton, and this is 2017, post the Manchester bomb attack. Apparently, Alex Belfield wrote to BBC Northampton, again, not really provoked, and for whatever reason, telling them how they haven't reported on the breakfast show about the bombing. So this is the Ariana Grande concert bombing. And he wrote this vile email titled 22 Dead or Bedding Plants, alleging that while the rest of the world was actually talking about this terrorist attack, commenting on it, that the BBC Radio Northampton refused to mention it. That story goes by, and obviously they would have probably had recordings of it. Like Bernie said, well, obviously this was the main story. Yes, the breakfast show would have covered it. So his boss and him just brush past it. But then Alex doesn't stop here. He still keeps harassing Bernie's boss about how Bernie would go on air, right? And you know, like during normal broadcasting, sometimes you plug your own work. Like you plug like what you're doing on the side. And he said like how he would do this without BBC permitting him. And obviously Bernie would say like, and his boss like, yeah, this was permitted. Like they allowed me to promote my own work. Why are you harassing me about these things? But mostly here, what like caused Bernie a lot of distress are the allegations that he didn't speak about the terrorist attack on his own show. And it's just a constant harassment, like Alex really coming for him with the senior staff at his own station. So the courts would hear the spams between Alex, or rather towards Bernie from Alex, starting even before that tweet in 2019, where he thought it was definitely Bernie who was alleging this, and he knew that for sure, and he was just trying to have BBC prove it. Bernie would tell the jury about the distressing evidence of how he actually came close to hanging himself because of just how frequent these spams were and how Alex was harassing him. The fact that he was making these public posts about Bernie Keith resulted in other people, his followers, also abusing him over a lengthy period of time. In some cases, the jurors will hear that this actually was extended to death threats. There was also scandalous accusation that Bernie would regularly have sex in public on gay beaches with strangers for 2 decades. And this was coupled with the threat to include the allegation in a story which Alex would end up selling for publication, because he worked for tabloids, so they would thrive on stories like this. When it comes to Bernie, Alex would be found guilty, and he would get 2 years and 6 months. In respect of count 5, there were some mitigating circumstances about him having good character, not having like any previous convictions here. But now back to that email published by Ben Hewis on Twitter. To wrap that story up, Alex makes that video exposing this story, saying how the apology just isn't enough, how Ben Hewis has to fess up who the email actually came from, and how he fully believes that it is Bernie Keefe, saying how he filed the complaint with the police and how his lawyers will be in touch. And this will be another prevalent thing throughout the trial, and that is that the threat of lawyers, like that all of these threats are kind of just there, that they're empty threats really, that he never really hired like a legal team to harass Ben, like that this was just another thing that he used in order to get the name of the person who sent email to Ben Hewis about his character, about Alex harassing people for the past decade. So at this point, he doesn't leave Ben Hewis to the police to do something. No, he has a call with him, which you can listen to on celebrity radio. He tries to get the information who sent the email, and he keeps repeating, and he just kind of like subtly threatens Ben in a way where he tells him like, you are a family man, like look at your picture, it's a picture with your wife and a child, you're a family man, you don't want to spend money on lawyers, you just want to tell me, right? And like Ben is kind of politely trying to tell him like, let me discuss this with my legal team, but like this isn't legally it's actually a tweet, it's just a tweet, and no, I'm not going to tell you who the email comes from. And Alex just continues on. So the court would be told that Alex went on to threaten legal action over the comments made after they were shared on Twitter, labeling it as unprovoked character assassination. But the prosecution would argue there was no evidence ever that Alex contacted lawyers over this incident. Now, after he hangs that call up with Ben Hewis, this is where this case goes completely insane. Like, this is when it's just batshit crazy, because he starts harassing Ben's family. In particular, he sends Ben an email with the baby scan, and apparently this baby scan was the baby that he was expecting, Ben that is, with his wife, and they shared it on the social media. The scan that he would receive in the email would have Ben's wife's name on it, and the email would go on to claim that Alex was now taking a harassment case against Ben, saying, we will go via your wife to access you, and claiming we now have your home address after you identified your location. A question, would you take this as a direct threat towards yourself and your family? Then, just like some dumb hitman, Alex goes on to add Ben's wife on Facebook. And Ben's wife just, you know, sort of like as they're on a couch, like watching TV and stuff, like checks her Facebook and asks her husband, while pregnant, may I add, oh, do you know an Alex Belfield? And Ben like freezes. He said like he didn't even tell her about anything, about like the scan, about the harassment, until she gave birth to the child. Like he didn't want to upset her wife, but like he just knew like he's dealing with somebody unhinged. The concluding statements in the court documents would actually state that they found that there was no intention of taking legal action against anybody really in this story, but rather that Alex used online threats in order to obtain details of who had supplied Mr. Hewis with that information that he used to publish that tweet. Here there are some aggravating circumstances: the fact that Alex contacted Ben's wife, the send of the scan of the unborn child. Also, Alex would contact Ben's clients in order to try to get him out of the business, and then also he would encourage his followers to abuse Ben Hewis. So for stalking and harassing Ben Hewis online, Alex would get 2 years and 6 months sentence. Now we go on to the second to last person here, Philip Dehaney. Here we don't have much information really beyond one video that I could find that Philip made himself, and also like the court documents. So Philip was a theater critic, and Alex, remember now the tweet, right? Ben Hewis publishes that tweet in 2019, unprovoked, cool, like you can understand Alex's point of view. Now, Alex, of course, as the unhinged person trying to prove a point here, goes into like people that liked and retweet that tweet from Ben Hewis, and he realizes there's a theater critic, Philip Dehaney, who, from what I understood, purely like retweeted or engaged with that tweet in some way, and Alex kicks off because it's like Ben has been trying to defame him. He has encouraged people in the industry to do so, and as you know, Alex had some connection with the theater industry through his YouTube channel. He kicks the hell off. So Alex would tag him in tweets, and the amount of this case that is just based on Twitter is something else. But then Philip kind of started defending himself. He's like, I was literally just an observer here. Like, I was literally just trying to see what this is all about. So he would start a blog on Alex's behavior. So what Alex decides to do, because of this has triggered him so much that somebody in the industry actually went along and followed Ben Hewis' advice. Alex decides to call this theater critic, Philip Dehaney, to call his mother, to reason with his mother. I have to read this out because the writing on the judge here is just something else. So they played apparently the recording of that call in the court, and the judge says about the mother of Mr. Dehaney, she's clearly a robust and impressive person. Everyone needs a mom like her. So mom of Philip Dehaney repeatedly and fairly asked him again and again what had her son done that was wrong, and you failed to provide any answer.
But I kind of feel that I've been keeping silent about all this since January, mainly because I didn't want the drama. I didn't want to get myself into any more trouble. But I now recognise that by keeping quiet about it, it's actually enabled Alex to target and victimize other people who aren't as resilient, and that needs to stop. So I've written up my entire account of what Alex put me through, and hopefully that for anybody who reads it, who shares my experience and has had a similar experience, you're not alone. And hopefully the more people that know what Alex is like and what he's capable of, the better chance we have of combating him and stopping him, because he needs to stop. The article is on my website, That Stagey blog.
This harassment and involvement of the family, and then of course what Alex does best is like he again in every single one of these cases goes onto YouTube, calls these people names, and just further encourages his followers to harass them. This has caused Philip Dehaney and everybody really in this case distressed when it comes to their family relations, when it comes to their mental health. They have been fearing their life because they feel like they are blackmailed, but also then are threatened. Like they have the whole following that they see, the videos amassing hundreds of thousands of views, where they know that Alex has been rallying people up against them. The judge would say that getting the parents involved actually caused strains in his family relations, in Philip's family relations, beyond speaking with his mom about apparent wrongdoing that Alex also couldn't explain. He would then proceed with his regular thing, which is going on YouTube and then spreading lies about these people, rallying up others to go further and harass them because they have defamed him, they have wronged him in some way, because Alex is always the victim in this case. So the judge would say that the content of the YouTube videos that he made about Philip Dehaney at the time, when he was clearly vulnerable and shielding with his parents during the first lockdown, was shocking. That his actions were planned, repetitive, and intended to cause Mr. Dehaney distress, and including hostility based on his sexual orientation. Yet again, he's triggered by some sexual orientation. And this next line, this is when I went into another rabbit hole. The judge says, I do not consider the fact that you're a member of LGBTQ community means you cannot have acted with hostility based on Mr. Dehaney's sexual orientation. For the charges surrounding Philip Dehaney, the judge would give Alex 12 weeks of custody with a range of a high-level community order to 26 weeks of custody. I don't know, does that mean community service? But it just piles up to his offenses. But apparently here it doesn't warrant like 2 years or anything like that. Possibly because there were less family members involved and possibly because it was happening during the shorter period of time. But then, where this led me to is whether or not Alex is part of the LGBTQ community. And it really doesn't matter here, but it does. If you think about it, it does, because some of his comments are transphobic towards Stephanie Hurst, and then here, yet again, it pops up, where it appears that he, representing himself, may I add, had revealed that he is part, from at least what I understand, that he is himself gay, and that's why those should be like mitigating circumstances in this case. And here is where I have gone off every single tangent and found a website called gayerstraight.com. Just please look at this beauty. Just please look at Alex Belfield's gaydar on this thing. It's like it comes with a gayometer, like it actually moves if you go onto this website. And according to 134 people, Alex Belfield is 84% gay. And then it says at the bottom, please vote. How gay is Alex Belfield? Listen, I found a silver lining. That's it. That is the comic relief that you have had during this video. Now we are going back to business. So, in summary, for Bernie, he was found guilty. When it comes to Ben Hewis, he was found guilty. And when it comes to Philip Dehaney, he was found not guilty to the charge of the indictment, but guilty of the alternative charge of simple stalking. From what I've seen, simple stalking simply stalking means that he just never intended to physically harm them. Correct me if that's wrong. So here apparently it didn't warrant like more time like it did in Ben Hewis's case. And here we come to the one last person we're going to talk about that brought charges against Alex. And if you remember, this happened later on. So if I remember right, like 2020 and 2021. And this person that we're talking about is a BBC broadcaster called Jeremy Vine. Over an 11-month period between 2020 and 2021, Alex would subject Jeremy Vine to a relentless online campaign that would include a wave of personal and unpleasant attacks. For you to understand the context here and how everything, at least in my opinion, just joins together as one huge, humongous 2-hour-long puzzle, okay? You need to understand who Jeremy Vine is. So he is a television, radio personality, presenter, broadcaster, journalist, best known as the host of the BBC Radio 2 lunchtime program. And this lunchtime program presents different subjects like news, views, interviews with live guests and popular music. Vine started his career reading the news at the BBC on the radio in Northern Ireland. He would then continue, and in the mid-90s he would become familiar to BBC TV viewers as a political reporter. So definitely more serious, like when it comes to just how he would broadcast things, when it comes to his journalistic style compared to Alex Belfield. In 1997 he became the Africa correspondent, and he was actually moved to Johannesburg. Traveling all over Africa, his reporting assignments led him to report on the war, to also report on the violence after South African troops went in to Lesotho and hoisted the South African flag over the royal palace. He traveled to different parts of Africa to report during political elections as well. He became known, especially in the late 90s, for the serious reports surrounding police brutality in Africa that he would report on BBC 2's Newsnight. Then, as with Alex, there is a Wikipedia page for everybody in this story. Well, not really everybody, but for the big players in this story, there is a Wikipedia page, and there is a subheading with controversies that I found to be really useful in this case. So, controversies surrounding Jeremy Vine were that he was admittedly and kind of exposed to have been overpaid compared to his colleagues, especially female colleagues. And he would apologize over that, you know, he would take a pay cut. I love how that was a controversy, like he took a pay cut, but sure. Then apparently in 2015 he was paid a 5-figure sum in order to host a post-dinner speech. And this was apparently a dinner organized by the people who were global arms manufacturers, so there was a controversy about that, like who paid him, like is he representing BBC, is he speaking on behalf of the BBC, and again, this was proven to be his personal appearance, so BBC kind of got excluded as in like this isn't a personal view of ours, we don't support people who are global arms manufacturers. There was also one that made me laugh again, like the comic relief in this story is something else, where in 2018 he apologized after a tweet suggested that people in Wales should speak English. He had apparently had to delete that tweet because of the backlash, because it was about like one caller, so he just made a comment about how this caller said that Welsh people don't speak English in the pubs, and people have taken it out of context. So those are the controversies that I could find on Jeremy Vine. There are some others, but they are kind of closely related to this story, okay? If you're screaming at me right now, they're closely related to this story, so I will mention them then and there. In the more recent decade, Jeremy Vine started hosting the former BBC 2 quiz show called Eggheads. From 2016-17, he also started co-presenting BBC's Crime Watch. I think you can get where I'm going just based off of how many times I have mentioned BBC and Jeremy Vine in the same sentence. Vine is synonymous with the BBC, and that is truly what is going to become crucial in this story. I would not say that he is national treasure, I would not say that he is the most popular guys. I have definitely seen controversies, some of them directly linked to this case that I will mention later. But we have one person who is a more respected, senior and serious broadcaster on one side, and then on the other we have a tabloid, we have entertainment journalist who did well for himself and then just spiraled out of control. But the truth of the matter here, at least for me, and the way that this story makes sense, is that eventually it was all leading up to this. Targeting somebody from the organization that Alex despised so much. And who better to do than the person that every job in the past decade that Jeremy had was closely tied to BBC in some way, shape or form. So the short of it is that it was 2019 and Jeremy Vine first became aware of Belfield. They never worked together, their paths have never crossed, they never knew of each other before. And Jeremy started becoming aware of Alex because in one of his YouTube videos, Alex Belfield called him a cunt. The short of it is that I cannot, and this pains me so much, pinpoint the exact moment of how these two worlds have intertwined. Like, when did Alex wake up? Because like with Ben Hughes, you can kind of be like, okay, there was a tweet, and then like Alex went into a spiral, he thought he was burning Keith, like he thought like he knew who sent the email. Like there was a moment, right? With certain people here, like with Philip Dehaney, and especially here with Jeremy Vine, I can't pinpoint a moment. Like when did Alex wake up and he was like, you know what, today is the day when I start being on this man's case. So Vine, apparently after Alex called him cunt online, like unprovoked, posted a picture of Alex online asking if anybody knew who he was. And this would trigger a series of events that included Alex posting Jeremy's home address online and also falsely accusing him of stealing £1,000 at a memorial service. We're gonna go into that right now, but that is truly the core of this case, where again Alex gets fixated on something and he tries to milk it, he gets people rallied up against it, and again like the harassment ensues. In order to give you the unbiased point of view, again Alex's side of things that will be heard in court was that this was the other way around, that Jeremy was the one who was unprovoked and started harassing him, and that it would be Jeremy and BBC who would file complaints. One of them even included a bomb threat, like as if Alex was holding like some bombs and like some sort of devices at his house, which would go to the police as a claim, as a complaint, and then the police would raid Alex Belfield's house during the lockdown. In Alex's sequence of events, he would go online to expose on his channel how there is one such broadcaster called Jeremy Vine that wants to see his demise without any charge or cause. Alex would say that he was arrested because Jeremy Vine made a complaint against him.
There are people who are trying desperately to close me down. They have been doing so for 18 months. The cancel culture in this country is out of control. And I need to now tell you about a national broadcaster who not only has had me arrested, but now wants to gag me from telling the story about why he had me arrested with no charge, with the civil injunction stopped, a stalking order brought on the back of me doing journalism, holding him to account and others, and never going anywhere near him, but being accused of violent stalking. Hi everyone, big news. Now, we do not want you to contact any of the people mentioned in this thing directly. If you would like to help me, you can write to your MP, write to Priti Patel, the BBC, either the press office, go to complaints, go to the Director General, go to anyone but the people named. Right, let's go. Adimush, it is a Thursday. This is one of the biggest announcements I've ever made here at The Voice of Reason, and I'm sorry to have to do it. I've done everything to try and avoid bringing it to you. But I have to tell you that in August 2020, I was arrested because Jeremy Vine had made a complaint. He said that I was violently stalking him. That's what I was arrested for, even though he admits I've never been near him or done anything to him in person. He says I'm obsessed with him and via my YouTube channel have tried to destroy him. I would say, on the contrary, he has tried to destroy me. He has come after me with his legal goons in the last few months. He had me arrested. He told untruths to the police that we can disprove. He followed trolls. He tried to have this YouTube channel taken down twice with 17 claims. And he also used a friend of his, the PI, a private investigator, to dig dirt on me to hope to destroy me. This man, as far as I'm concerned, is evil. And I could prove it in a court of law. Jeremy Vine says he is a godly man, but it seems he doesn't like to forgive. He just likes to get lawyers in to threaten, and I feel I have no choice at this point, as he keeps writing to us consistently saying that he wants to gag me and get an injunction to silence me over the truth. I only simply want to get to the truth, and I beg of him, let's go to court, and let's do this public domain. Let's get the press down there to cover and see who they think was holding who to account and who was being vindictive and evil.
So to summarize this best, as here we have the most factual evidence, the receipts if you wish. As I couldn't pinpoint how this started, we have the documents from the court, rather the transcripts of both tweets and the videos, because as I mentioned, a lot of these videos have been actually removed. And now I haven't seen, that's something else that I find interesting, in the court documents I haven't seen like that Alex was legally bound, or like that the court demanded that he removes those videos mentioning all of those people. And also then he reported on his own trial, so he, like, again, those videos are up. So I don't know, that did he decide on his own accord to remove them, or were they reported for like privacy reasons or something and then YouTube had to remove them? I wonder that, and I kind of think that it would be the latter. But here we have different evidence, like we finally have some evidence, and I will put transcripts of those. So there's multiple YouTube videos and then multiple tweets. The first video that Alex posted would be on 13th of July 2020, and this would be when he would call Jeremy Vine all sorts of things, where he would say that, you know, he is under attack, that Jeremy wants to hire a private investigator. He calls him a prick, says how he thinks he's above the law, that he's harassing him, that he's getting police involved. And the only video that I watched in full, well, I lie, I watched at least 2 of them in full. The one of the videos was from Alex reporting about his court procedures, right? Like, so he was reading from the actual cross-examination of Jeremy Vine. And here, in this cross-examination, according to Alex, from what I understood, he was claiming that the video where he calls him all sorts of things, including a cunt, that is edited. And apparently, according to Alex, again, Jeremy Vine couldn't really deny that.
but I was trying to explain that I was wearing 4 shirts within that video, which implied it was edited. So I went on to confirm this was edited from 4 programs. Someone has edited the video to make me look like I said, Jeremy Vine is a cunt and should die of coronavirus. The judge intervened again for clarity. The judge asked JV to clarify what he knows about that tape. I saw it in the context of the broadcast, he says. For avoidance of doubt, are you suggesting the police have edited the video? I asked Mr. Vine. I don't know if I sent it, was his reply. Mr. Vine, I said, we were told that you gave that tape to the police. It is paramount to this case. I then asked the usher to play the tape again so that the jury could see that it was impossible that it was from the same segment as I had changed shirts 4 times within the video.
All of the other evidence, all of the other tweets and transcripts of the videos are surrounding a specific party that Jeremy was part of. So for this, you kind of need some context, because the courts will hear that Alex accused Jeremy of stealing £1,000 of taxpayers' money. So there was a memorial for John Myers, who was another hero of Alex's apparently, and was also one of the other people working for the BBC. John Myers was a former radio exec, and he died suddenly in 2019, and there's nothing controversial about him in particular. Even Alex will tell you that. He will tell you he's his hero and he loved him. What he has a problem is that Jeremy Vine took about £1,000 to host the event for a load of other radio execs in order to have free drinks at a drinks party that apparently BBC knows of. So he took our money, taxpayers' money, in order to have drinks on behalf of somebody who would have been absolutely appalled by this. So it's the point of principle for Alex. This fixation is about the principle, because if he can spend taxpayers' money, all that money that goes to BBC funds the BBC, right? Like the license fee, everything we have spoken about. Jeremy Vine is taking that money, according allegedly, to Alex Belfield and really a lot of other people, to be honest, like from what I have seen. But apparently he's taking that money, spending our money with the permission of BBC. And the point of principle is, well, if he is doing it for somebody as famous as radio exec John Myers, why can it not go to Alex's auntie Fanny? According to Alex and what he was reading out in court, Jeremy would say it was entirely appropriate that this money was given by the BBC. However, Jeremy would tweet about this, and he would tweet BBC's freedom of information request, and that the wording is very clear. According to the BBC FOI, they had given £1,000 for the memorial, for rather the organization of the memorial, but Jeremy had nothing to do with it. He had no involvement with the contribution by the BBC or the organization of the event. However, for Alex, just like getting fixated on proving that Bernie Keefe was behind that email to Ben Hewis, he gets fixated here. So there's another tweet about why won't Jeremy Vine stop lying about this money. This is public money and an indefensible abuse of the license fee, because for him this ties it all together. And again, if you are a follower of Alex Belfield for years, if you have been listening to him now for at least a year at this point, tell you about defunding the BBC, pay some money into my account, they're taking taxpayers' money, and now he has something finally to tie it all together. He has a target, he has a scapegoat here. Then there's another tweet where Jeremy Vine has Alzheimer's because he doesn't remember about this. Then there's another video, again, accusing Jeremy of spending taxpayers' money on this party.
Mr. Vine said, it's a mischaracterization. I then went back to the FOI that states there were drinks and alcohol. The judge intervenes for clarification. I don't know what the rules are, Mr. Vine said. I think it's entirely appropriate, he said, that the £1,000 was given by the BBC. He didn't work for the BBC, though, did he, Mr. Vine? He was a consultant, Mr. Vine said. Mr. Myers wrote 2 reports. On what, Mr. Vine? He wrote a report on local radio. There were 2 reports, I said. I don't know, Mr. Vine said. I said you had to know the other report from local radio was one in your own radio station on national radio at Radio 2. I don't know, Mr. Vine said. Mr. Myers was renowned for 2 reports on waste of public money at the BBC. His whole career was raised on saving public money in his later life. Mr. Vine said it was entirely appropriate that the £1,000 of BBC money was used.
And finally, there is a video for, again, on the same matter, and Alex claims only I have the freedom of information, right? And in that it says that they were given 1,000. I'll have my day in court. And so he did. There were other sets of allegations against Vine, and I haven't seen them like in court documents that I could find online, but they are heavily publicized in the articles. And according to those, so there are a couple of them. In one of the occasions, while Alex is like trying to prove his point, he also said that Jeremy Vine made his daughter a director of his company, which is called Jelly Productions, from what I've looked at Company's House, and this was done in order for Jeremy to avoid paying more tax. This would be said by the prosecution to be completely untrue, and from the articles online I've seen that this daughter's name is supposed to be Martha, but I looked at Company's House page for Jeremy Vine and the person on there put as director is called Rachel, so again, I don't know, nobody managed to like really prove that, but it's an allegation out there. And then there was also like another thing about Jeremy tweeting once his dad passed away, and Alex Belfield responding to the tweet saying, "What would your father have said if he knew his son was a thieving tow rag?" A claim that we know to be true, even though I couldn't see the exact video, is based off of the court docs again, and that is that Alex even went as far to give out Jeremy Vine's address. Now, from the videos that I have seen on Alex's channel, I believe he tried to insinuate in court that Jeremy's address was public knowledge because of a video that circulated and that Jeremy tweeted about on his own Twitter page about like anti-vaxxers coming to his street, and it was them who exposed the address. So Alex was just an observer who knew of it. And I found the tweet. It is from October 2021, and I won't play it because again it does show the street and the house where apparently Jeremy does live. However, it still doesn't warrant then Alex redistributing that. And not just that, but from the sounds of the court documents and like what I read, it actually sounds like he provided them with the street name and the actual street number, like the first line of address, to like provided his followers with that, which this video of anti-vaxxers on Jeremy Vine's field really doesn't, because of course he has a family. He's not gonna be like, hey, this is where I live, by the way, anti-vaxxers came to my crib. About this, just like everybody else in court, Jeremy would say that his mental health took a dive. He has 2 teenage daughters and he can't be casual about it. So at this point, with the address being exposed, he was scared for them, for his family. So while Alex never physically approached him, Jeremy said that his actions had been worse than when he had had a physical stalker. And he says this is because you're fired on from every single direction. Every time you open your phone, he's there. Here at this point you can see this as a fixation, as Alex's mission as he's on this crusade to end the BBC, but instead he fixates on ruining the people that are loosely or tightly connected to the organization, probably thinking that's how he can prove best that they are using taxpayers' money in this sick way, and probably how he realizes it's the best way to rally people up, like when you give them actual individual targets, compared to just like, oh my god, they fund the BBC, here's like some stats and some facts about how they might or might not be spending the taxpayers' money. This is like actual physical targets that then those people can really rally up their forces against. Of course, Alex and his defense would offer a completely different view, that he was the one bullied because Jeremy Vine was the one who called him the Jimmy Savile of trolling, how he was just, you know, engaging in legitimate journalism. He was trying to uncover the story. And on top of that, because of that, rather, people have been trying to shut him up, especially Jeremy Vine and the BBC, and that's why they raided his house. He would say they raided his house about 5 times because he was exposing the inconvenient truths. He published tweets when the police would actually come to his house, saying, you know, how they didn't have any reasons for raiding his house, taking his devices, and also how the body cameras on these police officers have been turned off as well. So I've read like some articles from March of 2021, and they did raid his house, and according to some of those articles, he had been arrested 4 times before that. So like over the span of 10 months, during lockdown period, Alex had been arrested and his home had been searched twice with his computers and phones confiscated and, according to them at that point, not returned to him. At that point, apparently they have searched his house, and what went into Alex's favor, if really he was arrested 4 times, which I bet there would be a record of it that he could again prove. There's so many things here that we could have screenshots of, that we could have on Alex's side, proving his story, and it's just in his videos he doesn't include them, so I don't know really who to believe. But apparently he was discriminated against here, he was searched, and no charges were brought until, well, they were sort of like in 2022, until probably people had enough evidence to actually bring him to court. As for the verdict on Jeremy Vine, again, the judge would take into consideration all of the abuse, all of the harassment, like here really further than it went anywhere else, the exposure of the address and the exposure of like all of the private information. Alex would be found not guilty to the charge on the indictment, but guilty on the alternative charge of simple stalking. And he would be here given 12 weeks custody, again with the range of high-level community order to 26 weeks of custody. So I'll put up on the screen the summary of these sentences, but if you remember from the intro, the sentences would amount to the total of 5.5 years in jail. And that is the shortest sentence that they could have given, taking all of the offenses into account. Also, he will have to serve up to 1/2 of the sentence in custody, and the remainder apparently is gonna be out on license, so probably like community service and stuff. The restraining orders are in place, and they include online communications. So where is this case now? Well, as I told you, he has been charged literally earlier this month, so there's not that many updates. From what I have seen on the day of his sentences, on the day of his sentencing, he posted a video on YouTube saying he'll be back. It's just like a compilation of like best moments, whatever. And yeah, from what I know now, he is actually in jail, and as we know, he's gonna have to serve at least like 2.5 to 3 years. But again, if he gets a decent lawyer, if he actually again has the money to afford one and stuff, what are the chances that he won't be out and then again harassing somebody else? But what made this case interesting to so many people is that here is an accused stalker that was then proven to be guilty, going home each day after trial, after actually victimizing those people and representing himself in court and reading out what was said, taunting them even further. And how even Jeremy would say like, it just doesn't stop, because those videos, either the initial ones have been copied, and then also he had the privilege in a way of having the others, the ones where he's commenting on his case in court, left on the page. And how the certain platforms like YouTube and Twitter, in this case in particular, should have the obligation to remove those, especially like if somebody has been found guilty. The only thing that I have seen in the articles that YouTube had done is that they had demonetized his account since February. I think that's February this year, for violating their policy on harassment. However, what are the chances here? I would really like to know, based off of your opinion of everything that you have heard, that he won't be back, and probably out of jail earlier than we think, on someone else's back. Hopefully not mine. I put in this script, just reporting the news, Alex, just reporting the information that I found on the internet here. As for the victims, really Jeremy Vine was the one who gave interviews here. I haven't really seen the other ones like speak up about this after the trial, after the verdict, but Vine says that he believes many of the videos that led to his prosecution remain in circulation. And he was the person to call this case the Watershed one of online stalking. And he believes that in the light of it, some changes to community guidelines, to the guidelines of all of these social media sites should really kick in. The question here remains, will the people behind those platforms, will the people in charge listen, or is ignorance really bliss in this case? And only time will show, and maybe some psychological analysis of this man will confirm that ignoring him might be the way forward. And the day when I see that, where people ignore controversial characters like Alex Belfield, it's probably gonna be the day I die. I don't know, I mean, when will I ever see that? That was a rambling ending to this story, but that is the case of Alex Belfield. So after hearing everything, which story flows better for you? Was there a clear motive here? A man on a path to defund the BBC, to ruin the BBC and target the figures that personally affected him. And when that wasn't enough, target the man that was synonymous with the organization. I could have told you a different story today, and that's what pains me. This man was a journalist, he was a talented journalist, like, he is interested objectively, I can't think anymore. He was interested to listen to. He could have exposed this organization. He could have used legitimate journalism, as he calls it, to interview people. I could have told you an expose of BBC. We could have defunded the license fee. He had the time, he had the drive to do it, but he instead chose to do this. And that's what pains me. It's like there was a rise, there was a peak, there was a plateau, and then there was a clear fall for Alex Belfield. And that's what's truly so strange to me. It's like, when did the clicks happen? When did he just got up and he's like, let's harass these people, let's stalk them, let's just ruin their life and just fixate it, like, it just never stopped. And that is where, as I promised before, what I believe brought the guilty verdicts. That he went too far, that he targeted the families, that he targeted the wives, the mothers, like, he called them mother. He scanned a scan of an unborn child to the family. Like, that's where I think is the scariest part of this case. Is like, these people are celebrities, and this is how far this had to go for there even to be guilty verdicts, for him to even serve any time. Like, for you and me, what are the chances that if we were to have a stalker, somebody trolling us online, any sort of stalking presence, that this would even reach the point of trial? That's what I find so scary in this case. Like, these were all famous people that had a hand in it, and that's probably the only reason why he actually even went to trial. I don't know, that just sends shivers down my spine, because what are the chances for just common people like you and me? And had he not targeted the famous people and the families of those, would he have just been issued a couple of restraining orders and then been allowed to target somebody else? And the question really remains here, who is to say that he won't target somebody else once he's out? And as I said, hopefully not me. But what are the chances? What are the chances? And then the cycle just continues. Because if this man really doesn't get, like, some, I would say, psychological help, that's the only thing that can solve this. Like, some sort of psychological help for the cycle not to repeat itself constantly. Because otherwise, where are we? Then, like, what, there's another cycle of people. And again, if it is me or just other people reporting on this case online, what are our chances of defending ourselves against this guy? And what do you think? Like, will he actually stick to the restraining orders where he won't contact any of these people or publish anything about them online? Because these restraining orders, as I said, aren't limiting him to just physically reaching out to them. What are your thoughts on this one? This is just so bizarre, but also so interesting to me in terms of just the online stalking and how it is transcending to the online world, and definitely a watershed one. I'm looking forward to see if any of the platforms online change sort of their guidelines in the light of that, because the re-victimization here was something out of this world. Just the way that he managed to get away with representing himself in court and then reporting on it on his own YouTube channel is just different freaking universe. But I will be back in a week or week and a half with another story, hopefully a bit shorter than this. Maya, you can do it. You can make a script under 20 pages. I believe in you. Okay? You believe in me? Better subscribe and like and tell me if you want more stories like this. Voice gone. Maya out. Alright. So tired, guys. Bye, guys. Just Maya out. Just switch the mic off. Just mic off. Off air. Goodbye.